TFC draw Columbus Crew in their home opener of the 2023 season. Welcome into room 442. Sara Poraria joined with Michael Singh. Mikey, a rough season continues for TFC. Home opener, they wanted the win, and again, they blew a lead. It's not looking good right now.
Yeah, that's definitely the narrative going around. It's funny. They become the first team in Major League Soccer history to take a lead in each of its first 3 games and then blow that lead. That's not a good stat you want to be affiliated with at any time. But it's funny because, if you think about it, their first game against DC United, had they held on to that lead in the 89th minute instead of conceding 2 goals there, essentially at injury time, we'd be talking about this Toronto FC team having 5 points out of the gate in 3 matches and unbeaten. And I think...
But they didn't. That's the whole thing. They didn't.
But it just goes to show how fine the margins are when it comes to this point in the season, right? And clearly there's frustration boiling over as well. But let's focus on a positive first to start, because there's going to be a lot more that we're going to get into here. But positive, DeAndre Kerr.
Yeah,
Sara, we called it.
Yeah, you called it. You said he was going to start. And really, really nice goal from him. Lots of confidence, that step over and just going for it himself, essentially. I think it shows a lot of potential for him. And I think TFC need that with the several injuries of the guys up front. So I'm happy for them there, for sure. But it's also one game, right? Let's see how this continues to keep going.
Yeah, no, a big guy to step, as you mentioned. They needed somebody to kind of step up and fill that role with both Akinola and Diomande out. And I honestly thought he was probably the best striker that we've seen so far this year for Toronto FC. And not just because he scored the goal, which, by the way, he also had a meg on that goal, which was very nice.
Disgusting.
And I love to see that. But also what I really liked about him was his hold-up play, right? He's young, but yet still he's in there battling for a header against some big center backs. He's holding up the ball really well, and the best part about it was his passes were crisp and accurate when he did, under pressure, have to make a decision. And I thought he was really good at that part of the game. He only played 60 minutes because they're still building up his fitness, but I think a good start, and I think he's in line for some more minutes here down the stretch.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's also talk about why DeAndre Kerr started. We were texting when the lineups came out on Saturday. No Lorenzo Insigne for TFC, not even on the squad. We were nearly sure he would at least make an appearance. Home opener, this is who the fans want to see. You were at training on Friday, and you kind of came out saying it seems like he'll be there.
Yeah.
But then I guess that changed. And here's what Bob Bradley had to say about why Lorenzo Insigne did, in fact, not play.
You guys know he's trained during the week, and we've tried to be very aware of how he felt every day. And yesterday, there were still some moments where he felt a little something in the groin. And we just didn't want to take any chances. So, it's a minor groin strain, but there's still some plays yesterday where you can tell he's feeling it still a little bit, and that was still the case today. So that's how the decision was made.
So it does seem like it was a last-minute decision. Was it the right decision? Probably, if he's injured, but it's not great when you have the home opener and one of the big stars obviously can't even show up on the pitch.
No, there was definitely a lot of frustration from the fan base with the build-up to sort of the week, seeing Lorenzo Insigne in training, hearing Bob Bradley say that he's hopeful and optimistic that Insigne will be playing on Saturday, and then he gets pulled out. I mean, a lot of fans go there to see Lorenzo Insigne. He obviously pulls a lot of fans into that stadium. So definitely disappointment from the crowd. I think you're right. It was probably a last-minute decision. Because like you said, when we spoke to Bob on Friday, it really did sound like Lorenzo Insigne was on track to train. But if Bob Bradley goes to him and he finds out that Insigne is still feeling some discomfort in his groin, which, by the way, is the first time Bob Bradley has actually come out and said groin strain, which I thought was pretty interesting as well, then they can't take that risk with their $14 million player. So I think that's sort of how it played out.
Yeah. Got injured in the first match, misses the next 2. There's a bit of a timeline here that we know next week they have Inter Miami.
Big game.
Big game. Bob Bradley did reference, though, Insigne and his injury timeline. This is what he had to say about that.
I'm hopeful for Lorenzo, but you know you got to see what happens as he's training and moving. If in certain training sessions he's not in a situation where he has to stretch for a ball or whatever, then maybe he thinks, yeah, I'm okay. But there still seems to be a little pain in certain moments as he has to reach out for a ball, the same way that it happened on the play in DC. So I'm hopeful that it's not, we did a scan. I think there's potentially another scan to make sure it's nothing more. The initial scan was very minor, but he's still feeling something with certain actions, and we want to be very careful about that. So I don't have a clear idea of what that one means.
I mean, as any coach would reference an injured player, very vague but positive, not really much to say, but I guess they just don't want it to continue, and they're trying to take all the precautions they can.
Yeah, I wasn't as positive, actually, from that. Reading between the lines, what I'm hearing Bob Bradley say is that there's something else there that they can't actually put their finger on just yet. So when he says they potentially have to get a second scan, when he says the first scan came very minor, when he says that he's hopeful and optimistic that Lorenzo Insigne was going to play in that game and he doesn't, that's where I'm like, okay, maybe there is something else still there that is lingering. He said the word again. He's hopeful that Lorenzo Insigne will play against Inter Miami, but, and there was the but to it, there was no promises there. We need to see how he responds in training this week. So it's positive that he's on the field and he is doing work, but groins are tricky. That's a very tricky area. And if you can't identify exactly what the issue is, that's concerning. And even more so because it's Lorenzo Insigne, the highest paid player in Major League Soccer history. That's a concern.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one with Lorenzo Insigne because he came over from Napoli not 100%. And we knew there were some calf, concerns with him, and we saw that last season. And then to start this season with, now we're hearing what is a groin injury, it's frustrating for fans, for teammates, for Coach Bob Bradley, everyone involved. It obviously is frustrating. Somebody else who actually...
Yeah, it's a buzzword.
Yeah, who was frustrated after the home opener, Federico Bernardeschi, talking about how this start wasn't good for his mentality. Listen to this.
I think we need to play more, for sure, because in the second half, especially in the second half, we didn't play, and for sure we need to play more football, more right pass on field and not long ball. We need to improve. We need to win the game, because we need the win. We played 3 match and 1 lost and 2 tie, and this is no good for me, for my mentality.
Really tough for Bernardeschi there. You know, because he's so much younger than Insigne and coming to MLS, I think it's such a shock still sometimes for him, because he was playing at one of the biggest clubs in Italy, Champions League football. And coming here, I really can assume that this must be aggravating.
He's a perennial winner, right? He didn't come to Major League Soccer, which is obviously a downgrade from Serie A, to be on a team that's consistently losing. And this is why we said at the beginning of the year that Toronto FC need to get off to a good start to the season. Because of what happened last season, their first taste in Toronto, that didn't sit well with them. They wanted to come here and they wanted to tear up the league and they wanted to win. And I say they, obviously, Bernardeschi and Insigne. Now, Bernardeschi's done his part, I think, so far this year for Toronto FC, right? He's been unbelievable. I actually thought against Columbus was probably his quietest game. Bob Bradley afterwards chalked that up to TFC not getting him the ball in the right areas. And for me, it sounds like he's almost calling out his teammates. Not necessarily just in that clip, but also I think in a one that we have coming up. Eleanor, if we can just roll that clip in from Bernardeschi.
Do you feel that the team was kind of like the lines were very separated from one another? How do you fix that? Like, is it the midfield have to be a little bit more together in order for you to take the ball and bring it up?
Yes, for sure. I think we need more connection to the defense, to midfielder, and to the striker. But the connection comes when you play football. When you played a long ball, the connection is very it's very difficult, no? Because you played only for the second ball, and this is no good for me, no good for our quality, because we have a lot of quality inside the team, and we need to create more chance to score every game.
You know, I don't blame him, because we actually spoken about this after TFC's first 2 matches, but the midfield just hasn't been good enough. And that's why we saw in those matches Bernardeschi holding the ball as much as he can, running up the flank, doing everything kind of on his own, because I feel like there's a lack of maybe trust between these players. And he's kind of referencing that now, saying it is exactly what it is. They are not getting the ball to the players that need to get the ball up front.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're a star player on the team and you're coming out and you're saying that as a team, we need to be better at connecting passes, this is not good for my game, this is not good for our qualities as a team, that's not what you want to hear your third game into the season.
For sure.
Right? And especially coming from a guy of Federico Bernardeschi's stature, we know how important he is to this TFC team, to the culture, honestly, now in Toronto, because fans absolutely adore this guy. The one thing you don't want happening is Federico Bernardeschi getting frustrated. So if you're Bob Bradley, like, what's your reaction to this if you're hearing Bernardeschi saying that?
Well, I mean, it comes down to training, and it comes down to playing more. I think they have to still play more together. I think
Definitely.
there's still it's a new team. We know Ozo was out for most of last season anyway, so I'm sure he's still adjusting, but I really think it does come down to Ozo, Bradley, and Kay have not been good enough this season. Yep. And it's not, there's no disrespect to them as players. Individually, we know what they've done, but you have to perform better.
Sometimes, even though you have the qualities there that should, complement each other, it doesn't always work out that way. Like you said, individually, Marc-Anthony Kaye, Jonathan Osorio, both Canadian internationals, important players for Team Canada. They're definitely really, really good Major League Soccer players. Michael Bradley, we know what he's done, and he's actually had a really good start to this year as well. The quality's there, but sometimes it just doesn't quite click with the rest of the team around them. Now, I'm not saying it can't, because if Marc-Anthony Kaye becomes a little bit sharper in the midfield, if Jonathan Osorio, who I think has had a fairly slow start to the year, if he turns it up and starts being the Jonathan Osorio of last year, then maybe this midfield turns it around. They do become one of the best midfields in MLS, because that's their ceiling, that's their potential. But right now it just hasn't worked out, and that is a major cause for concern, and why the main reason why Bernardeschi's probably frustrated is because they're not connecting passes in the way that they want to in the midfield.
Yeah. We have one last clip from Bernardeschi referencing that next game against Miami and saying that they need to get those points. Here's what he had to say.
For sure, we need 3 points. Saturday, maybe we will look together in the video the game, or for sure we need to work hard, because for me, for my mentality, this is not the starter. I hope to non era l'inizio che mi aspettavo, come si dice?
It's not what we expected for the start of the game, for the home opener.
Yes, and I'm very disappointed today. I feel bad because it's the first match in our stadium, with our fans. It's cold, and the people comes in the stadium for us, and the people need the win, need the 3 points for come si dice, l'entusiasmo.
To be enthusiastic about the game.
Yes, and I feel disappointed about it.
I mean, what a fan favorite, though, he must be, because just acknowledging those fans in the cold, I'm sure anyone who was out there at BMO Field on Saturday were like, thank you, because it was freezing.
No, this guy just gets it.
Yeah.
He understands exactly the right things to say at the right times. And for him to play to that side of the aspect, I think it's brilliant by him. And I also think it's authentic by him. Like, I don't think he's faking necessarily saying that. Some players do that, right? They know what to say. They say the right things. For him, it comes across as really genuine and really authentic there. And yeah, it was freezing. I remember halfway through the second half, Bernardeschi had to jog over the sidelines and just get a pair of gloves because obviously this isn't necessarily the same climate he's used to. I know he's played in cold games in the past, but not necessarily maybe something like this. But yeah, you're right. He's become quite clearly a fan favorite in Toronto, and it is because of moments like that. For him to come out and say, you know, next game we need 3 points. Well, I think that's what the fan base believes too, because at the end of the match, there was actually not everybody, but there were some boo birds, you know, boo birds floating around at the end, at final whistle. So pressure's on right now at TFC, man.
And welcoming Inter Miami to BMO Field, that's not going to be an easy 3 points for them to get, and that they're looking for their first result still. I'm definitely concerned. I don't think I have much confidence in them against Inter Miami. I mean, the week will go on, and we'll keep you guys updated, obviously, Insigne, but it's not a good mentality going into this match, I feel, right now, overall.
Yeah, no, and I one of the things we said at the beginning of the year is if one of Insigne, one of Bernardeschi goes down at this point of the year, Toronto FC are in trouble. And I think so far that's what we've seen through the first 3 games of the season. But it's still very early. You know, this part of the year, soccer is not always the greatest. It'll come down to whether or not they can find their footing before May, maybe this season, because of the League's Cup. It's a little bit congested, this part of the schedule. But yeah, nothing really too inspiring from these first 3 games so far from TFC.
Well, I guess the only good thing is that it can only go up from here. TFC take on Inter Miami Saturday at BMO Field.